Hello and welcome to this video where we will talk about a book that has sparked a lot of debate and controversy in the field of international relations. The book is called Destined for War: Can America and China Escape Thucydides' Trap? And it is written by Graham Allison, a professor of government at Harvard University and a former Assistant Secretary of Defense. The book's main argument is that the United States and China are heading toward a war neither wants, because of a historical pattern that has repeated itself many times in the past. This pattern is called Thucydides' Trap, after the ancient Greek historian who wrote about the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. In this video, we will summarize the main points of the book, examine some of the historical examples that Allison uses to illustrate his argument, and discuss some of the criticisms and implications of his thesis. What is Thucydides' trap? Thucydides' trap is a term coined by Allison to describe a situation where a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, creating a structural stress that makes war more likely. Allison argues that this phenomenon is as old as history itself, and that it has occurred 16 times in the last 500 years. Out of these 16 cases, 12 resulted in war, while only 4 were resolved peacefully. The most famous example of Thucydides' trap is the one that inspired the term, the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta in the 5th century BC. Thucydides, who was an Athenian general and historian, explained that it was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable. According to Allison, the same logic applies to the current situation between the United States and China. He claims that China's rapid economic growth, military expansion, and geopolitical influence have challenged America's dominance in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond, creating a sense of insecurity and rivalry between the two powers. He warns that unless both sides take steps to avoid conflict, they could end up in a catastrophic war that would destroy both countries and the world order. Historical examples. To support his argument, Allison provides several historical examples of Thucydides' trap from different regions and eras. He analyzes each case in terms of its causes, dynamics, outcomes, and lessons. Here are some of the most notable ones. The War of Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714. This was a war between France and an alliance of European powers over who would inherit the Spanish throne after the death of King Charles II. France was the rising power at the time, while Britain was the ruling power. The war ended with Britain gaining more territory and naval supremacy, while France suffered heavy losses and debts. The Napoleonic Wars, 1803 to 1815. These were a series of wars between France and various coalitions of European powers over Napoleon's ambition to dominate Europe. France was the rising power at the time, while Britain was the ruling power. The wars ended with Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo and his exile to St. Helena, while Britain emerged as the undisputed leader of Europe. The First World War, 1914 to 1918. This was a global war between two alliances, the Triple Entente, Britain, France, Russia, and the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire. Germany was the rising power at the time, while Britain was the ruling power. The war ended with Germany's defeat and humiliation in the Treaty of Versailles, while Britain suffered huge casualties and debts. The Second World War, 1939 to 1945. This was another global war between two alliances, the Allies, Britain, France, Soviet Union, United States, and the Axis, Germany, Italy, Japan. Germany and Japan were the rising powers at the time, while Britain and France were the ruling powers. The war ended with Germany's and Japan's unconditional surrender and occupation by the Allies, while Britain and France lost their colonial empires. The Cold War, 1947 to 1991. This was a state of geopolitical tension between two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was the rising power at the time, while the United States was the ruling power. The Cold War ended with the Soviet Union's collapse and dissolution into 15 independent states, while the United States remained as the sole superpower. Allison's book has received mixed reviews from scholars, policymakers, and journalists. Some of the main criticisms include: The concept of Thucydides' trap is too simplistic and deterministic and ignores the role of human agency, diplomacy, and institutions in shaping the outcomes of international relations. The historical cases that Allison uses are not comparable to the current situation between the United States and China, and do not account for the differences in culture, ideology, values, and interests that shape their behavior. The book exaggerates the threat posed by China's rise and overlooks the sources of cooperation and interdependence that exist between the two countries, such as trade, investment, education, and climate change. The book does not offer any concrete or realistic solutions to avoid war, and instead relies on vague and idealistic recommendations, such as building mutual trust, respect, and understanding. Despite its flaws, Allison's book raises some important questions and challenges for both the United States and China, as well as for the rest of the world. Some of the implications include: the United States and China need to recognize the risks of Thucydides' trap and avoid actions that could escalate tensions or trigger a crisis, such as military provocations, trade wars, cyber attacks, or human rights violations. The United States and China need to engage in dialogue and consultation on issues of common concern, such as nuclear proliferation, terrorism, pandemics, and regional stability, and seek areas of cooperation and compromise. The United States and China need to manage their domestic politics and public opinion, and avoid nationalist or populist rhetoric that could inflame hostility or resentment toward each other. The rest of the world needs to play a constructive role in maintaining peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific region and beyond, and avoid taking sides or being drawn into a conflict between the United States and China. In conclusion, Destined for War, Can America and China Escape Thucydides' Trap? Is a provocative and controversial book that offers a historical perspective on the current state of the U.S.-China relations. It argues that the two countries are on a collision course that could lead to war unless they take steps to avoid it. The book has its strengths and weaknesses, but it also has implications for both countries and the world. Whether or not you agree with Allison's thesis, it is worth reading and discussing. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more book reviews. See you next time.